Welcome everybody to another episode of Holy Smokes. I'm Christian Smith, the heretic and the host. We are coming closer to the end of season one. And this is very exciting for us to have made it this far. We got one more episode after this one. And today we're talking about whiteness. What is it? How does it operate? This is going to be exciting. We got a significant portion of the crew with us today. I can't wait. I want to go ahead and allow everybody to just introduce themselves so we can get into it. I'll start. Today, what I want everybody to share with us is your name, what are you drinking, what are you smoking, and then how do you feel about July 4th, either this year or in general, because your feelings about it this year may have changed. And that's cool if they did, or it just may be how you've always felt about July 4th. So I want to hear from everybody on the crew what you're drinking, what you're smoking, how do you feel about July 4th? I'll start. Again, I'm Christian, the host, the heretic. I'm smoking Fat Bottom Betty again today. It's my girlfriend. We have a very strong relationship, and it only grows deeper from day to day. And I'm just grateful for her presence in my life, right? My life will never be the same since she came into it.
A wonderful one.
We need some good atmospheric music right now.
Mm-hmm.
We can't deny what you're saying. What you're saying is a true thing.
It is.
She is a wonderful woman.
Absolutely.
It sounds like you're starting a Boys to Men song. Hey, baby.
Shout out to Deadwood Tobacco for creating it.
Yes.
And Deadwood Tobacco owners, everybody associated, please don't say anything racist online. Like, if you're racist, just keep it to yourself. I don't want to have to break up with my girlfriend. All right, we've already gone through the thing with Gurkha. Please, Deadwood Tobacco, if you're racist, just keep it to yourselves. All right. So I'm also drinking coffee with a Parsons Proof. Shout out Greg DeLoach. How do I feel about the 4th of July? I am always grateful for a day off. Next, Myron.
That's awesome. Myron Randall here. They call me the Mystic. This is my first time embracing that. Myron Randall the Mystic. This is me.
Yeah.
I am not smoking because I'm inside, folks, but I am drinking the same thing that Christian is, a little coffee here with Parsons Proof, and I see the maker of Parsons Proof down there at the bottom, Greg DeLoach, right here. Thank you very much, Greg DeLoach, for this gift. How do I feel about the 4th of July? I don't like to call it the 4th of July. I call it Crispus Attucks Day because we wouldn't have American independence if it wasn't for the first person to die in the Revolutionary War, a black man, Crispus Attucks, March 5th, 1770, is when he gave his life so America could be free. So happy Crispus Attucks Day.
I love it. I love it. Nikki.
Hey, y'all. I am smoking my first PD cigar, a Sweet Maduro. I'm excited about that because everybody's been talking on it, and I finally felt like I could graduate to the Maduro. So that's where we are today. I have my coffee. Unfortunately, I'm out of my own stash of Parsons Proof. So I had to take a little after Curvance, and I put a little. Yeah, yes. So a little coffee with agave and a shot of bourbon. And how do I feel about the 4th? I think I may start taking up Myron's thing and calling it Crispus Attucks Day. Is that what you said?
You got it.
Make sure I've got the right. No, so the 4th of July, so many mixed feelings, and frustrated because so many people in my life don't see the patriotism in the way that I display my patriotism. So, but I think there are lots of different ways to express that. And sometimes that's critique. And that's where I am this year.
Gotcha. That's fair. That's fair. Thank you for sharing.
Sure.
Now we have the bearded sage with us. Greg, can you hear us?
Yeah, I can hear. Can y'all hear me?
Yes, we can.
Yay!
Tell us.
Good deal.
Well,
All right.
we hope you're not drinking because obviously you're driving.
Please don't.
No,
But go ahead, introduce yourself. We haven't seen you
not
on the show in
drinking.
a while.
That's, I know it has been a while, but yeah, not drinking anything and not smoking anything. We're on the way to getting out of town. So, but I do have Fat Bottom Betty in the back seat. We'll just leave it at that. And so, yeah, and so
She gets around.
in terms of the 4th, I was
She gets around.
Yeah, she.
I'm sorry.
Yeah, leave that one alone too. Myron introduced us. What can I say?
I do firsthand.
I thought I
a
was
wonderful woman.
only one. I thought I was the only one, but anyway.
Oh God.
So yeah, I was telling Christian. Christian and I were chatting the other day. I did not grow up with any kind of tradition related to the 4th. So it's we're farm family and a very tiny town. So there was no parades, no fireworks. There was not really any value one way or another. It was just another. I won't say just another day, but just wasn't a lot of emotion attached to it. And I think for us, we noticed a turn after 9/11 where it became something very different. And I'll just leave it at that.
Okay. All right. The bearded sage has blessed us with his presence. And now let's move on to the pundit who already backstage hit us with a pun. Usually we have to wait for like the first 60 seconds of the show. But today, the pundit has already blessed us with the pun. Grayson, hit us.
Do you want me to say what that pun is, or just leave it at that?
Nah, because you're gonna have plenty throughout the show. Just keep.
True. Hello, everyone. I am, as you have been told, the pundit. Pronouns he, him, is. I am not smoking, which is typical for me. And I'm also not drinking. I had a fair bit of wine last night, so I am atoning for that by not drinking today. And I also got awoken by an Amber Alert at like 4 a.m. and wasn't able to fall back asleep, which like the Amber Alert is the worst situation. So I'm just in a strange headspace. All that to say, I'm drinking sparkling water, blackberry flavored. So that's my nosh for the day. And how I feel about the 4th, I'm, despite what I said before we went live about the protest I'm attending in Centennial Park later, which has an expletive that is alliterative with 4th at the beginning, a four-letter word. I feel somewhat like Nikki feels. And it was actually kind of what got me thinking about it was a comment that a former acquaintance of mine from high school commented on a post I made on Facebook yesterday. He was like, how about you just compliment America? What crazy idea, huh? It's like, how about try complimenting America? And it got me thinking, like, because I don't want to I try not to dismiss people out of hand. So I was like, well, okay, there are things that I do like about this patch of land that I happen to be born on. So what could we celebrate about it, even as we critique the hell out of it? So I think with Nikki, this year, I'm like, 4th of July is not worth celebrating, like more so than most years. But I think if there are times in which the positive aspects of this country, like the ideals that we strive for and are enshrined, no matter how flippantly we hold on to them, then I can maybe feel a little better about participating in some celebrations of like, hey, there is good here. Let's acknowledge that. But this year, no, like the 4th of July is just hypocritical this year. if it has always been. According to Frederick Douglass, it's always been. So complicated feelings, and Pride Day and Juneteenth are more Independence Days than this Independence Day, and that's how I feel every year.
Mm, yeah, and I think it's okay for us to, have different feelings from year to year. I think, you know,
Mm-hmm.
we don't have to be stuck in one way of doing things or in one way of feeling. And so it makes sense for people to have more conflicted feelings this year. Real quick, I want to say good morning to everybody. We got Ariana who's with us. I think our number one. I think it's the competition right now between Ariana and Blake, who goes the hardest for us right now. So
Ooh.
Ariana, you got some competition. But we love Ariana and Blake for joining us. And as you can see, Ariana just said Grayson just be out here hurting the country's feelings, apparently.
I was like, America will be fine. They can take it.
All right, we got one more person to introduce herself. She goes by the truth. Karima Akila, talk to us.
Morning, y'all. How y'all be? It's
All right.
Everyone again. I have to agree with Grayson. That 4 a.m. Amber Alert. First of all, I started the night with a whole bunch of delicious wine as well. Tried a new wine, Cooper and Thief,
Okay.
and it was delicious. It was delicious. So, but then that Amber Alert came, and my head space just like yours. I'm a little woo woo today. So yeah, I'm just coffee real nice and hard. But as far as the 4th goes, growing up, the 4th was just a day to enjoy fireworks. My family never. I felt like we always understood that it was somebody else's party, and that we were just somebody else's party. It wasn't ours. And so kind of like, you just peek over the fence and look at what other people are doing at their party because it's not for you. And, they might throw you over a goodie bag or something, at the end of the party, and you get to enjoy the fireworks of their party. And then, you go on about your business and, try and create your own space. But it was never something that belonged to me or to my family. As I've gotten older, my children and I would celebrate Juneteenth on the 4th. So we would take their party and make it ours.
Yes.
On Juneteenth, but then on the 4th, it was always about, okay, we're going to celebrate our independence and snatch some of these fireworks. But yeah, it was just a day, to another day to grill, another day to do whatever. And today, I even forgot it was the 4th. I had such a great time on Juneteenth that I feel like I did all the celebrating that's necessary because this is not my party anyway.
I like that. Somebody else's party, and I can participate in the party without it being mine. That's why I appreciate the day off. I genuinely, like you're not gonna threaten me with an opportunity to grill on a day off, and I'm gonna say no, because so yeah. I mean, my thought on it has evolved over the years. Like I used to celebrate July 4th a lot. And I think me understanding history better has really shaped that. Like when I started to learn the history of Independence Day and of Black independence and liberation, I discovered, what I was taught in school is not the true history.
Yeah.
And that changed everything. That's why I always tell people you should really, if you haven't already, read the book called Lies My Teacher Told Me. It's a great book. The premise of the book is, and I've said this before, so if you already heard me say it, forgive me, I'm gonna say it again. The premise of the book is history is the one topic taught in our education system that the more you learn, the dumber you get. Because it's always mistaught. So when we learn math, inevitably we get better in math. And when we learn English, we learn better how to read and how to, conjugate verbs, so on and so forth. But in our history classes, we inevitably get dumber because we're always taught something that isn't true history. There are important parts that are left out of the story. Stuff is misconstrued and twisted because history courses in most of our educational system is just sheer propaganda. So learning that. Go ahead.
I was just gonna say, and it's really tragic. I was fortunate to have a history professor who taught history in the way it's supposed to be taught. But for so many, history is that subject that the coach teaches. Like, we need this new football coach. Put him in history. Like, it always seems like government, civics, history, sociology, like all the social sciences seem to be the places that the most inept and probably biased people who are employed by the school to use Black bodies to get money for the school then teach history.
It was just crazy because history is so important. But
yeah.
let me not get on that soapbox.
Right, we're done.
Yeah. So quickly, let me run through our ground rules. Holy Smokes, Cigars, and Spirituality. We bring disruptive faith-based content, and we provide it hopefully for the everyday person. A lot of people on this cast are academics, educators, thinkers, theologians, scholars, brilliant minds. And usually in the world of academia, we tend to use a lot of technical terminology that the average person doesn't really care about. Now, the terminology is great. It makes wonderful, poetic, beautiful, artistic sentences, but we just want to make it accessible to everybody. So we have this thing called a dollar jar. And when people like Myron or Grayson or Kurt Vance, if he decides to join us today, when they use their big words and they don't define them, they got to put $1 in the jar so we can make sure we make all of the language accessible. And then we've also expanded on the dollar jar. We haven't made it official yet, but anytime Grayson does a bad pun, he has to put in $2. And then anytime somebody what's the term, comes for somebody else, attacks somebody else, usually that's Tiger who does that. They got to put in $5.
We can call it the attack tax.
Say what?
We can call it the attack tax.
$2. There's a perfect example. Thank you, Grayson. You just gave us an example of how the dollar jar works. Grayson has $2.
And you have 5 for coming at me like that.
I'm just calling you out on the bad pun. That's all I'm doing. That's a part of the rules. Also, we have one rule at Holy Smokes, and this is the only thing that we swear by. It's the only non-negotiable, that we respect each other's lived experience. Because when we have conversations about life, faith, and theology, we tend to lift up our doctrines and our theories over experiences that people have actually lived. So at Holy Smokes, what we challenge people to do is, when you encounter somebody whose lived experience contradicts your theory or your doctrine, you take that as an opportunity to learn from what they have lived. Because sometimes lived experiences will help us to shift and reshape our doctrines. And I believe that's where we are in our history as a people right now, where we're hearing more of people's lived experiences, and hopefully it's helping us to rethink some of our doctrines. So that is the basics, and that one rule is based on something called Greatest Commandment Theology. I am really excited because my manuscript has been submitted to the publisher for my book. And it's about Greatest Commandment Theology. The book is going to be called Breaking All the Rules. Greatest Commandment Theology is very simple. It states that your love for God is displayed through how you love your neighbor, which is an extension of how you love yourself. So what I preach and practice is that you can't fully love God if you don't love your neighbor, and you can't fully love your neighbor if you don't love yourself. That is said throughout the Bible. It is reinforced all over the place. But I believe it's one of those very simple concepts that we tend to overlook in Christian spaces, because we stigmatize self-love. We make people feel guilty if they talk about actually loving and honoring themselves. And I'm hoping that we can shift that basic assumption. Another word for that will be paradigm. I want us to be able to shift that paradigm to root our faith in an authentic affirming love for self. So those are the preliminaries. That also plays a lot into the topic today because we're talking about whiteness. Oh man, what is whiteness? So this is what I want to do. I want to go ahead and let these brilliant people go ahead and start talking about it. So Greg, I want you to get ready because I got the first question and I'm coming right at you. So just before we even dig into a lot of the nuances, Greg, can you help us? Why is the topic of whiteness even an important discussion for us today?
Okay.
Can you hear us, Greg? Greg,
no, I'm struggling. How about now? Can y'all hear me okay?
Yes.
We can hear you.
Yeah. You can?
Okay,
You can hear me okay. I can talk. I just can't hear as well.
Go ahead and talk. Let's see what happens.
All righty. So I caught just a little bit of what was being said, but I can tell you I'm an expert at being white. I've been white all my life. So I appreciate the opportunity to speak about it. And the problem of whiteness is that, and maybe I'll just keep it personal. The problem of my whiteness is that I don't ever think about being white, and that's a problem. It's kind of like and the analogy will probably break down, but it's like a white sheet of paper. You don't really give any mind to it. It's blank space until there are black lines drawn or etched or shaded, and then that gives it context and it gives it a picture, a depiction. It creates its own narrative. When I was an art student in my former life, we were taught about engraving, and so you begin with like white glossy paper and you cover it in black India ink, and only then when you start etching out by reverse hemispheres of your brain, but it's also more importantly to teach your brain how to look at things and realize you need both sides in order to really be creative and to tell a fuller story. Unfortunately, when whiteness becomes something you don't think about, when there are those black lines threatening and the narrative changes, and sometimes that's very discomforting. So again, to just say the problem of whiteness is that we've made that I've made that normative, and that's a problem. And only of recent are we beginning to think beyond that. So I hope some of that got through. There's certainly more to talk about, but I'll leave it at that for right now.
No, a good portion of it got through, and we appreciate that. This whole idea of whiteness being normative is, that's very important. I just want to take a pause right there. And can anybody answer this question that Marielle just asked? Who's in the lead for the dollar jar? Anybody know who that is?
That's Kervance Ross. That would be in the lead for the dollar jar.
I think you're right. I think it's Kervance Ross, the kingmaker. Anybody else? So why is the topic of whiteness so important?
I'll pop in here because whiteness is a social construct. If you study it, it's a concept. It's not a physicality, right? Because if you look at it, race is scientifically insignificant because my heart can beat in a white body and a white heart can beat in my black body. So it's not significant scientifically, but it's a social construct that's created to exercise privilege over another.
Yeah.
And so whiteness comes to bear as a concept that is privilege based and privilege oriented. And so that is, in my idea, what whiteness is and why it's important to talk about it, because you forget about it. And people who are white and privilege based forget about the fact that they are privileged.
Yeah, you bring up a great point, and I'll even expand on that. Whiteness is a social construct, and as a result, we've socially constructed blackness and every other race, right? And I think sometimes people forget that all these races that we subscribe to are all social constructs. I am going through a book by one of my professors, Shaniqua Walker Barnes, called "I Bring the Voices of My
Hey.
People." I recommend anybody who's interested in understanding a little bit more about how race functions in society. You need to read that book. Grayson is holding up a picture of it right now. I bring the voices of my people. I hope I think I want to see if I can get Shaniqua Walker Barnes to come be a part of our show one of these days and maybe talk to us a little bit more about her book. But I was privileged actually to be in one of her courses on racial reconciliation, where she did some of the activities that she talks about in her book. And there was this activity where she would separate people based on racial and ethnic identity, and she would tell the people in these individual groups to think of some characteristics of their race of which they are proud. And the black people would get into the group and we would just start running a list of stuff like just nonstop. We're resilient. We persevere. We got faith. We're creative, so on and so forth. And in every course that she's done, including the one that I was a part of, the people in the white group would really struggle. Like, what can I be proud of about my whiteness? And that was such a telling activity. But here's the problem. Some of the white people in that group, instead of taking the time to critique their whiteness, they took that as an opportunity to critique the activity. So, so they would argue with her about the rules of the activity. And she shared an exchange in her book that she had with one of the white students. And they told her that, they can't really do this because whiteness is a social construct. And she said, well, so is blackness. Please continue with the activity. And they said, but yeah, I've never really considered myself as white. I just think I'm American. And she had to tell them there's a lot of privilege in who gets to say who's American. Please continue with the activity. And they were doing everything they could to critique the activity rather than deal with the truth about their whiteness. And we can sometimes get lost in whiteness being normative, and then sometimes we get lost in, well, whiteness is a social construct, so it doesn't exist. Well, all of this is a social construct, so all of it does exist. We have to deal with that reality. Like, we can't just avoid whiteness by saying it's a social construct. We still have to deal with the reality of what was constructed. So I just wanted to add that in. I'm a huge fan of Shaniqua Walker Barnes. She may or may not know that. Well, I think she knows that. Let's keep going. Anybody else? Karima, the truth. Hit us with some truth, Karima. Why do we need to talk about whiteness?
I think because it's become the standard. I remember my old pastor used to always refer to it by saying, it's the standard upon which things are judged. It's white and it's right. And if it's growing up, I remember just comparing my hair, the length of it, the texture of it, comparing, of course, my skin color, comparing the way I talk. I hate the fact that it is become a standard upon which the rest of the minority groups have to then judge their value against. If there was a way that we could do away with that, then I think that the decentralization of whiteness would mean that each individual person then is able to be valued based upon who they are, period, without there being a standard. That blows my mind. It blows my mind that somehow a group of people or someone asserted this group of people and their way of being over everyone else. It's like, what type of mind do you have to have in order to think that that's okay? And in order to not think that it's okay, but create a whole entire system that is built upon and revolves around sustaining this way of thinking. So, I feel like as time has progressed, we've increased our awareness of this, right? So I'm a mama with 6 kids, and all the little black girls trying to play with their baby dolls and Barbie dolls and such. And when it's Christmas time or birthday, and you got to go buy the little chocolate girl, little baby doll. I had to intentionally think about, okay, I can't go to that store because that's an all-white neighborhood. They ain't gonna have no chocolate babies. Let me go over here, you know what I'm saying? And then go to where all the diversity is, and pray that I can find a chocolate baby on the shelf, because they are such in high demand. Because why? Why is that important? Because I wanted my daughters especially to see themselves reflected, to create a different paradigm inside of themselves, that you are your own standard of beauty, of intelligence, and you base your own value upon yourself. Have you improved in the past year from yourself, not comparing yourself to someone else? So in my mind, when I think of whiteness, I just think of a standard upon which most of my life was judged upon. I shared with you all before, my mama was a sharecropper, right? So she was entrenched and indoctrinated in Jim Crow South. That's all she knew. So growing up, I would talk about my friends, and her first question, are they white or black? And I'd be like, Ma, it doesn't matter. Now, when I was little, I would say that, but now I understand, because in her world, she had to know where am I putting the standard? Oh, they white? Okay, standard goes up here, right? And oh, they black? Okay, well, let me bring it down here. Because in her mind, growing up, everything that she saw that was colored was poor. It was poor quality. It wasn't what white was, right? She saw it visually. White only, colored only. White only was nice. It was pristine. It was held up. Colored only was run down the back of the door. And so when you have this washing, this whitewashing of your consciousness, it's no question why every single thing about your entire being is judged upon being like somebody else. I hate that. And the balance for me is to hate that, and I'm gonna be real, but not hate white people. To hate what whiteness has done, but not to hate those who look like this. And so, that's a balance that I fight to maintain, because I do believe in a world where that doesn't have to be. And I believe in a world where I can love and appreciate and value each person individually, regardless of what they look like on the outside.
Mm-hmm.
Can I pop in here and say something else here? And I know I just said something, but Kareem, I think you defined 2 levels of whiteness in there, right? I think you talked about white privilege, which is this kind of normalization of whiteness, which means because you operate in a system of whiteness, you get access to privilege that others who are not white have access to, i.e. going to the store and finding a baby doll that looks like you. That's privilege, right? Turning on the television and being able to see an entire white cast so that you can operate in the paradigm of possibility while other races cannot operate in that same paradigm. The paradigm of possibility is learning to see yourself in another person's shoes so that you think that's attainable to you. I mean, I can turn on the television. There's only been one black president. So I can either be like that black president or I can't be president at all, right? So because I'm black, that's one level of the concept of whiteness. And then you talked about another one, which I think is white supremacy, which is to believe that whiteness is better than all the rest.
Right.
So there's the normalization of it. And then there's the supremacy, which is the belief that, hey, if it ain't white,
it ain't right.
Not right. Right. And so I think that is evil. I think white privilege we need to dismantle because it's built into society. And it's evil, but we need to slowly dismantle it. White privilege or white supremacy is straight out evil that we need to call out and root out right away. And if you're a white supremacist, we need to cast you out in the name of Jesus, because that's a devil that needs to be eliminated.
Amen.
The other is something that is a root that systematically needs to be eliminated because it was built in how the country was framed and made. Yep. But if it's supremacy, it's a devil straight from hell. That's a cancer that we need to immediately root out. Does that make sense in that paradigm shift here? Is what I'm saying?
Exactly. That's it exactly.
It does, because I feel like privilege, we've talked about it before. It's not limited to whiteness, but certainly is a product of and function of. But I can leverage my white privilege, and I have more agency. I think white people, which is the privilege we're discussing here, have agency in how that privilege is used. So like, I can use white privilege for good, which is an act of dismantling it. To use it is to almost to abuse it, because I am using it against white supremacy. So yes, it's almost like we need to use white privilege as a wick that burns out the candle and produces something good, but its intent is to be burnt out.
We're gonna take back the $2. The $2 you owe from earlier. We're gonna give you a credit, so you don't owe anything as of now. That was good. White privilege as the wick that burns out. Grayson the pundit.
That's exactly what I was trying to say, but you said it so much better.
Well, thank you. Glad to see that a black man is helping me with my credit. That seems to be an interesting role. But yeah, so I wanted to bring in, and first, thank you, Karima, as always, for bringing in I feel like you meld the personal and the political so well. And of course, those are one and the same. But I just love how you always go back to, I'm a mama, and this is what this means. Because that is your heart. That is your life. So it's always moving to me. So I just wanted to say that. And with Shanika Walker Barnes, I am actually taking that race class next semester, Christian. I guess like the next installment, which I'm sure is going to be pointed, to say the least, in these days. But one part of the book that I really love, which gets at what we're talking about, like the social construction, the Kingmaker.
The Kingmaker has arrived.
Salutation.
Oh yeah, we're gonna come back to the Kingmaker in a minute. It's good to see you, brother. Grayson, go ahead and finish what you were saying, Grayson.
Yeah, so thank you. But so she says, race is a construction, and it is also real. It is real because it makes a tangible impact on people's material lives. And then what I love is she says, what is considered breakfast, and this is just like an analogy, in any particular place is socially constructed as a complex and dynamic interplay between the foods that are local to the area, et cetera, et cetera. But breakfast is also very real. At this moment, my belly is full of a social construction. A social construction is fueling my body. And I think that sums up very, very well how whiteness is both real and unreal. It is unreal because it is evil and because it is a lie. And if we believe that truth is the only reality, then whiteness is of the devil and unreal. But it is also very, very real in the fact of privilege and the fact of the existence of America, period. Built as it is upon genocide to further European imperialism, which would then later be called whiteness in order to maintain that and evolve it in the new context in which the slaveholders found themselves. Just as it continues to evolve from chattel slavery to Jim Crow or Reconstruction to Jim Crow to mass incarceration in the police state, et cetera, et cetera. So I think we need to talk about whiteness in the same way that when you're in therapy, you have to talk about your childhood. You have to talk about your parents. You have to talk about that which gave you being, because it is from that you act. It is out of however you experience your beginning that defines your present. And so if we don't talk about whiteness, we don't talk about America's parent, and we don't talk about that which gave birth to America. And so we're not talking about America. We're talking about what we would like it to be, with the land of the free, home of the brave, whatever bullshit. But what we need to talk about is mama and daddy, which is whiteness, which is what gave birth to us, or else we'll never be able to reckon with who we actually are. Which is, and if we don't talk about it, then our souls are malnourished because our souls need truth, and we are acquiescing, giving up to, seceding to a lie, and thinking that it's going to sustain us.
That's good, man. I have so many thoughts, but before I like pivot and ask any other questions, we haven't heard from Nikki yet on this first question, and then we'll pull the Kingmaker in here to get his thoughts too. Nikki, anchor us. Come on, help us out.
I mean, I think y'all have said so many things that are true and fair. And as I think about why it's important to me to talk about this, I actually go back to Christian at the beginning when we were talking about the 4th of July and the history of that and how we teach history. I think the very fact that we don't talk about whiteness is the reason that it has so much power. And I think the fact that we don't teach that it is a construct, when we don't teach how it is a social construct, we open up the door for us to believe that white is right. Because white is what you see, white is how things are done, white's what's on television, white is what is in most of our printed media, white is what is in ads. And so we open up the door for us to interpret that white is right because that's what we see. But we fail to acknowledge the ways that's what we see, because that's who has power. And so the reason I want to talk about whiteness is because I've been lied to my whole life about what whiteness is. And so it shows up in things like, I was in marching band in high school. And I went to a school that was 3-to-1 black to white. We had a particular way that we marched. And it's not what you might think, considering we were 3-to-1 black to white at my high school. We marched very straight. There was very little dancing and movement in our marching. And the other bands that played across from us during the football games had a different style than what we had. And I remember there was this sense that our way was right and that way was wrong. That way was more sloppy. That way was not as musically astute. And I have come to learn that all of that was a lie. And what I was being taught is that white marching band is the right way, where black marching band is the wrong way. But that's never what was said. And I have come to learn of a wonderful tradition of African-American marching bands that bring amazing entertainment and incredible music and liveliness and joy. I'm a big marching band fan. I'm a big geek. I'll own it. I was like, I sang a song about marching shoe bandos in high school, like for real. So, but I have come to learn that I was taught wrong about what was good marching band, because what I was taught is white was right. And so that's like a picture. And it shows up in so many things that we do. And so I want to talk about it because I want to find out all the stuff I've been missing. Right? Like, I learned there's so much that I have missed out on because I've been taught that this way to do things is right and that way to do things is wrong. Anyway, yeah.
That is excellent. That is really good. You just actually reminded me of how that still plays out even in our spaces, you know, and I see in my experience, I went to Alabama A&M University, and I've affiliated with a number of people from historically Black colleges and universities. And there is a celebratory nature in our culture, particularly at moments of high achievement. And in a lot of Black families, you have some millennials, Gen Xers, who are the first person in their family to graduate from college. That is a big moment. And walking across that stage is such an experience when you realize the struggle of everybody in your family and your ancestry for you to be here at this moment. And man, people want to celebrate sometimes. People want to lift their hands. People might have a dance they want to do, right? That's a part of our experience. It's a part of our culture. And it really bothers me when I see administrations at these colleges try to just cut out all of the celebration. You don't do that. We stay in line. We don't do any of that stuff. We're gonna take your diploma. We're gonna do this. And I'm like, yo, what is it about this standard of stand up straight, walk forward, don't do anything, don't look to the left, don't look to the right. You can't celebrate. Like, we should be celebrating. Why can't we not have our own experience of celebrating this monumental occasion? Why do we have to model ourselves after the predominantly white institutions that we're trying to be like? No, we have our own experience. Let's do what we do. If somebody wants to dance, let them dance. They represent 6, 7, 8 generations of Black people that came before them that couldn't have this moment. They should be dancing. They should be crying. They should be celebrating. That's our history. That's our heritage. And I feel like sometimes that white is right standard bleeds over even into predominantly Black spaces and institutions. And everybody's not going to agree with me on that. I totally understand. That's just my perspective. I want to go ahead. So Kingmaker, thank you for joining us. We know you have a lot of ministry stuff going on at New Birth. So we thank you for taking time from that to be with us today. We are really still kind of in the introductory phase of this conversation where we're asking, why is the conversation about whiteness even important? You have any thoughts on why we need to be having this conversation, Kingmaker?
Yeah, first of all, thank you all for letting me jump in midstream. I think the last comment is what triggered my current thought. My mother was born in 1954, and 5 years ago, when we were planning for her 60th birthday, when I asked her the year prior what she wanted, her response was, "I want a birthday party." I said, "Okay, and what do you want to go along with that?" She was like, "I want the cake, I want the balloons, I want all of this." And as we started planning that particular year, after being her son for, at that time, about 38 years, it was the first time that I had a conversation and realized my mother in 60 years had never had a birthday party. And being 60 was important to her because for 38 years, she had celebrated my birthday. She had celebrated her grandmother's birthday. She had celebrated friends, loved ones, and never had she had the opportunity to be celebrated herself. And when I'm listening, as I tuned in, the reason we have to have a conversation about whiteness is whiteness allows Blackness to finally feel the way my mother felt when she turned 60. I just want to have a party and be celebrated, because I watch white people celebrate all the time. They celebrate their failures. They celebrate their successes. They celebrate their ups. They celebrate their downs. And I've never actually in this country in a real context without talking about whiteness, because we're always talking about how horrible blackness is.
Mm.
Really had a chance to celebrate in this country just me being alive. Simply because I spend so much time celebrating breaking into corporate America, celebrating graduating from high school, celebrating becoming 25 so I'll no longer be a statistic, celebrating moving out of the hood, celebrating going down I-20 and making it to my destination without being accosted by the police, and having to celebrate talking to my daughter while she asked, what did he do wrong for the police to kill him? And she just turned. Forces us to even have a parallel conversation, because while Nikki was talking, I'm on the other side of that marching band, being in a marching band since I was in the 3rd grade, being in a marching band that holds the name of Frederick Douglass, going to Alabama A&M University, the greatest institution this side of the 3rd level of heaven.
That's right.
And being
right.
able to operate in the historically Black college context, watching a band do corps style marching. When I was in high school, my marching band, to make sure that we were diverse, Mr. Moody would make so for us to go to drum competitions, we couldn't pick our feet up 8 to 5. We couldn't put straps on. We couldn't try down the field and dance, because they would not accept us into the competition unless we went heel toe and put a carrier on and played the Four Horsemen and played all of the songs that white bands played. And then to watch as I graduated from college, it was one of those moments where you start to realize we got to really have a conversation about whiteness, because right now whiteness has been the definition of America. It's been the definition of Christianity. It's been the definition of finance. It's been the definition of faith. It's been the definition of perfection, which has to beg the question, if whiteness is all that, why do I even exist? So if we don't talk about whiteness, we go back to the moment where, just like my mom about 5 years ago, I want to have the conversation because I just want to have a party so that people who live in whiteness can be okay celebrating somebody who lives in blackness.
I think, Ross, I'll read the comment since you're driving. But Cody Cox, our producer, said, the magnificent marching machine of Morgan State University may object to what you have to say.
You know, Cody makes a lot of good decisions in his life. This was not one of them. So we don't listen to objections from people who are not in the type of air that we're in. So I can get you an admissions application. I think we do online classes at Alabama A&M now, and we can help you from there, Cody, because really you haven't graduated yet if you didn't go to Alabama A&M.
Because you got 2 Morganites up on here. Okay, watch yourself.
Oh.
There is nothing like the banter amongst Black college students and alum. We just have fun picking on each other and also celebrating each other at the same time. I wouldn't trade my Black college experience for the world. I wouldn't trade it for the world. So a lot has been said. There's something I want to jump back to for a second though, and see if anybody has any thoughts. Karima shared something earlier that spoke to me, and it was a question she asked, like, what is it in the mind of a person that creates a system like this, that creates this idea of whiteness that is used to subject other people to oppression? And I just want to unpack that for a second if we can. Does anybody have any thoughts on the significance of somebody creating a system like that? Like, what is it that makes somebody do that? And not just somebody, but a people. Anybody have anything on that?
I kind of want to jump in on it. I don't have an answer because I can't say that I would be able to think that way. It is, and I think that's what blows me away, because racism at its core is literally about marginalizing and oppressing a person or group of people based off of color. Black people want to win. Black people want to succeed, but I don't know that Black people have it in them to want to see an entire race of people marginalized. And when you think about the level of evil that it takes for somebody not for a year, not for a decade, not for a century, but literally the entire existence of them coming, taking something that didn't even belong to them, to come into a space and now say, as I saw a lady who shot me a video on yesterday, she was at a Black Lives Matter rally, and she was white. She's on the back of a pickup truck that she had painted with the Confederate flag, and she had it in her hand. And she said, as clear as the video could show, I may not be here, but I'm going to teach my grandchildren to hate you niggas. And it was one of those moments that I was like, what's your psychological makeup to feel so okay that you can say, even if I'm not here, I'm going to teach my grandchildren to hate you? It's like, I want to talk to somebody who believes that mindset and understand, how do you feel comfortable in your flesh saying that out of your mouth and then turn around saying, I'm a Christian? I would like to have the conversation around whiteness with somebody who lives in that level of whiteness in their flesh, to understand how you find peace in yourself, making that statement and feeling like God directed you to be so superior that qualifies me to be inferior, and everything connected to me or looking like me maximizes who you are as a Christian and as a human.
Kervance, I think, sorry, go, Myron, you were going to say something.
Yeah, I was going to just say, two thoughts, and this is me going into my mysticism here, folks. One, that's why I believe, just as I believe that there is a God who is a power for the positive, I believe there is a devil who is a power for the negative. And I think that's the only way I can explain someone hating another human in such a way that they want to see them die and they don't want to see them win. And I really think that whiteness has existed since the beginning of time. I think America gives it a name, but I think it's existed since Genesis 4. When Cain kills his brother Abel because his sacrifice is subpar, and instead of trying to learn from Abel, he decides to assassinate Abel so that his sacrifice is the standard sacrifice and the only sacrifice. I think that's the definition of whiteness. And the only reason Cain killed Abel is because there was a devil whispering in his ear saying subpar is better than what your brother had. That's a devil. That's whiteness. And America has participated in giving that a name.
Damn.
Grayson.
Yo, you gotta pause for a second after that, man. You gotta pause for a second after that.
I kind of went off into the
Ooh-wee. I'm gonna preach that.
Well, I tell you what I'm gonna do. I'm gonna go back to where I was before I logged in. Because there ain't no reason for me to be on here no more. Tell me what the next
too kind. I'm
episode
telling you,
is.
it came from this dashiki I'm wearing. That's where it came from.
Christian, what's the next episode? I'll tune in for the next episode because there ain't nothing else for this one now.
Nah, this is the final episode. I've decided after that we're done. Yeah, we're gonna do a spinoff of Holy Smokes, and it's gonna be the Mystic Show because he just needs to have it on his own from now on.
That's cheeky.
Ooh, okay, all right. Grayson, go ahead.
I'm going to probably step in some hot water by saying I don't think I agree, Myron.
All right, give it to us.
Because white people don't need yet another thing to pass the blame on to. And I don't want a devil to receive the scapegoating and receive the responsibility that's ours to receive.
Ooh.
So
we having fun today.
Go ahead, Grace.
Well, I agree. Like, we gave this desire for greed, this power, this domination, this exploitation. We can't say that white people corner the market on that because A, we don't need to monopolize something else, but B, because we don't need to, and I'm going to define this, we don't need to give ourselves an ontology, meaning that we don't need to give ourselves a ground of being that doesn't exist. So we are not real. White people are not real. I am real in that I have peach-ish skin and have European ancestry, but I am both white and not white. And so I don't want to have maybe the devil and whiteness are one the same at times, maybe. But then that also gets into theology of whether you believe in a devil or not, and that's just a different conversation that's not quite relevant. Whiteness can
evil.
Right. This is a whole other conversation. And whiteness can be devilish and maybe is at its core devilish. So I don't disagree with that. But I think whiteness is, as you said, Myron, the name of the systematized, concretized mode of being that is domination, oppression, exploitation, etc. So like whiteness is the collective name for that. But we are not the first people to do that. So I think in not giving whiteness this ground of being, we can also then say that what is made will be unmade. And so if we say that whiteness is the devil, then we're lending it some kind of cosmology that makes it unassailable and makes it too real. When in fact, the more that I can point to its falseness and its fragility and its fantasy, then I can say, and we can do something about it and we can get rid of it. So I agree with you and I disagree with you because I don't want to pass that buck. I want it to be, no, people made these decisions out of their own volition, out of their own will. And I do want to get back to you, Myron, because I see you were about to say something. But the last thing I want to say is, Karima, I'm not so much interested in what their minds were because I think the minds were the problem. It was so based in rationality and logic that you can make the most irrational and evil thing seem okay if you make logic your highest goal. You make rationality your highest goal, which was the project of the Enlightenment, right? Like, it's almost like rationality supplanted God at the top of this chain of existence called the Scala Naturae. And so if you don't have rationality, as the savage people did, air quotes, then you don't have God, you don't have existence. And so the logic is there. The evil operates as evil when you think that what you're doing makes sense and is justifiable. I'm more interested in the poverty of soul and spirit that exists and existed within white people to make them think that that logic is more important than what that logic was leading towards.
Yeah.
And so I think why white people hate the existence of black people is A, because it reminds every existence of a black person, every black person we interact with is a reminder of that awful crime we are participating in and we benefit from that we have not reconciled with. And so we take that guilt and we say, no, you're making me uncomfortable. I don't like you, when actually we don't like ourselves. We're not comfortable in our skin. We're not comfortable with who we are because we recognize somewhere deep down that we are a lie and that we are the product of the most abject evil that we have seen in the past 400 years. And until we reconcile with that, we're going to hate black people because we actually hate ourselves and we're afraid of what Black people have because Black people have humanity and we don't.
Wow.
I want to respond to Grayson. So Grayson, I'm separating the people from the process, or from I'm separating the system from the people, which is why I suggest there's a devil, because I would assert that you don't have to be white to operate in whiteness. And I think the biggest actors in operating in whiteness are white people. But I also think there are others who then participate in the system of whiteness. And I think it is a devil that lies to people and say that this is the optimal system that you have to operate, that don't be you, operate in this, and that's the system that you should participate in. So that's why I would like to suggest it is a devil. Now, it is up to white people to own the fact that they have been deceived by the great deception and realize that they are not the normalization of all things good and perfect. But I definitely want to say that there is something outside of the system that suggests that the system is the best system. And I want to say that's a devil and that's evil.
I need to see something real quick. Ross, give me 1 second. Give me 1 second, Ross, because I want to come back to you, but I want to see if the ladies have anything they want to add to this, because y'all been observing, and I know how y'all do. Y'all sit over there and plot, and then y'all come and drop something on us. Do you have anything over there? Because y'all just come and drop the bomb on us at a certain point. Do either of you have anything you want to add to this?
What you got, Nikki?
I'm just kind of sitting in the middle of Myron and Grayson.
Okay, all right. Cool.
All right, right? Like, I feel like, listen, Genesis 1-11, it is my favorite passages in Scripture. It will never fail us. And so I love that you found another way to connect Genesis 1-11, specifically chapter 4, to what we're talking about. I really think Genesis 1-11, we could almost do without the rest. Those 11 chapters, like it is my favorite words, and those 11 chapters are my favorite words in all of humanity. So I believe deeply that, I think, Myron, you're right. I think that connecting it to the Cain and Abel story helps us see those human tendencies that we have to define ourselves by comparing ourselves to others, rather than defining ourselves by what God has created within us. And I think that speaks to the brokenness in us that allows the kind of mindset to develop that allows the idea of whiteness to grow and flourish. And so I think that connecting it to that ancient text helps us to see the parts of ourselves that we need to tend to heal and to dismantle whiteness as primary or normal. But I also think that the idea of an actual devil, that's a whole nother conversation. That probably needs a whole other episode. But
Season two.
Right.
But I do think Grayson has a really important word in this, that part of whiteness is passing the buck. It's deflecting away from what's happening and what whiteness is doing. Like a part of the nature of it, a part of the character of whiteness is to deflect away from it so that you can't see what's actually happening. And so I think there has to be a balance between the two of those. So anyway, that's where I am right now. I'm still.
Come on, Enneagram 9.
Well, you know.
The truth and then the kingmaker. The truth, you got anything you want to add right there?
Very quickly, I think Nikki said it perfectly. I think it boils down to the basic problem, root of all evil in humanity across the board. And that is anytime we operate apart from the nature of God, then you will see fear and selfishness do what fear and selfishness does. At the base of it, fear. And so in that regard, if you are afraid that another people group can have power over you, then you're going to do what you need to do in order to conquer and subdue. And so when we understand and separate that fear from our humanity, then I think that across the board, all people, because like you said, you can operate in whiteness and not be white, because it is that idea of, I got to get you before you get me.
Mm-hmm.
And so when you extract that and take that out of it and heal that, right? That's the sickness of our humanity that needs to be healed. Then we can operate in the spaces that God created us to operate in. And that is from a platform of abundance, understanding what we are and who we are. Then when you operate from that place of all is well, I already have everything that I need. I am already full. I come to the table already full and with full measure and full worth. Then I don't have to exert myself over someone else.
Yes, ma'am. Yes, ma'am. Kingmaker.
I'm sorry, I couldn't hear Kareem. I hate I missed it. She's the only person I can't hear. I am, as much as I like Myron's angle, and I thought it was profound, and I enjoy Grayson's angle as well. I got a few arguments with it. One of my first arguments is the reality that not being parallel to God and Satan, because I don't think that there is, and not saying that you were saying this, Myron, but just for the sake of the conversation, there is no antithesis to God. Within this, I see Satan as an adversary that has an MO and has a chemical makeup that I can identify. And within that reality, I know how to defeat Satan from a spiritual, psychological, and an emotional standpoint. That does not mean that I do what I know on a regular basis. Satan has the same tricks, has the same processes, has the same platform. And I do know that with the help of God, I can overcome, and as the old church would say, put the devil under my feet. Unfortunately, I can't do that with white people. I have not been able to pray white people away. I have not been able to put white folks under my feet. I cannot, I know what evil looks like. And unfortunately, if I take that platform that you argue, to be honest, I feel like I'm giving Satan a raw deal because of the fact that Satan has never tried to marginalize me because of my skin tone. He just don't want me to be at my optimum level. Satan wants me to succeed. He may not want me to succeed at an optimal level. He doesn't want me to prosper and be in good health, but he has no desire to see me fail. Satan does not mind me being a Christian. He just don't want me to live out my purpose. So Satan has parameters to allow me to live and operate in success. White folks don't. And to just give it to Satan, I would much rather deal with Satan on a daily basis than to deal with white people in the structure of whiteness. And that is a challenge simply because Satan doesn't care what color I am. He doesn't care my face. He just doesn't want to see me at my optimum. He don't want to take away my what I do. So I argue the fact that at least Satan wants me to live. Satan don't mind having a house. He doesn't mind me having friends. He doesn't mind me having love. He just doesn't want me to get all God has for me. That is at least better than what white people do to black people. So I'm not going to just give that to the devil. And I'm not going to allow that to be the angle. I love the angle. I love the argument. But in this reality, the devil does better with me on a racial standpoint and on a human standpoint than white people do.
Shoo!
Shit.
I would suggest
Yep.
that one is the same personally, but at the same time, I understand the thought. I understand. I do want to push back a
like
little bit on some semantics here. Gracie, you used the word fantasy in talking about the allusion to whiteness, and I don't like that word fantasy in alluding to whiteness.
Okay.
I prefer the word lie, because nobody builds
Okay.
life on a fantasy, but people will build their life on a lie. And I think people have built their lives on the lie of whiteness as opposed to participating in the fantasy of whiteness. But again, after Ross there, I would suggest that they're one and the same. that is the devil incarnate. You think the devil has parameters. I don't. I think that's the essence of evil, right? The essence of evil is to make you think the devil has parameters while he's destroying the borders the whole time. But there you go.
God, so
The reason that I feel that way is because the devil cannot do his optimum work without a subject. So within that dynamic, the devil has parameters. If we don't give him a vehicle, he doesn't have his operatory component. So as the old church song said, don't let the devil ride. If you let him ride, he'll want to drive. In this dynamic, those are parameters. White people don't have.
That
I
the
understand.
vehicle is whiteness. That is what the devil is riding and driving. He is driving whiteness itself. So I'm separating people from the product. Whiteness is whiteness, and he is driving whiteness into the hearts of people, making them.
So you're telling me that Satan drives a Prius? Is that what you're saying?
I'm saying whiteness is white.
So my only argument with that,
You
Myra,
fool.
is if that's the case, then my flip side to this would be, is God's power minimized to the vehicle of whiteness? Because I can see where God manifests his power in every other space where Satan has authority. What I never see God do manifesting his power is in whiteness in America. So in that dynamic, if that's the concern, if the devil has no parameters, if the devil can use this vehicle, what that argument for me now says is that God's boundaries on his deliverance stops at the devil's opportunity to use whiteness as a vehicle. Because the only thing I've seen, if that's the narrative that God doesn't have power over, is white folks in America.
Wow.
Can I say something?
So, yeah.
I don't have anything as beautiful as what y'all just said. Like, everybody has blown my mind in this moment. I have a thought though that I think ties in a lot of what everybody is saying. I do believe that we tend to scapegoat beings outside of our comprehension for the evil shit that we do. And then sometimes we scapegoat beings outside of our comprehension for the goodness that we do as well. I believe we use God as a scapegoat and we use the devil as a scapegoat, when really we need to deal with the complexity of our humanity. Because when we talk about whiteness, Nikki brought up the deflection that people tend to do with whiteness. There are two deflections that I see that white people do. This past week with that white couple that pulled their guns on the black ladies, the white lady said something very interesting. She's like, you can't keep calling white people racist. Nobody is racist. Nobody is racist. So one deflection is just a complete denial of the reality, right? And then the other deflection is to deflect to other cultures who have carried out similar acts. Because sometimes what we do is we get stuck in our present experience without considering the scope of human history. And we think, what's happening now is somehow unique. But as Myron brought up, violence in humanity and the denial of people's humanity and right to exist goes all the way back to the beginning of our existence on this planet. Humans are not innately corrupt. We're innately complex. We have just as much capacity for evil as we do for good. So when we think about what is it that happens in the mind of people who create systems like this and commit violence like this, it doesn't stop with whiteness. We see slavery throughout human history. We see genocide throughout human history. We see knees on the necks of people groups throughout history. We're just in a situation now, or in a place now where we see it particularly as black and white. And the reality is, it goes all the way back. Let's go back to Genesis again, Nikki. You like Genesis 1-11? Let's deal with the Great Flood narrative.
Right.
When God decided to start all over again, because God was furious with humanity. When we read that story that introduces the flood narrative, the reason cited for God's fury is humanity's violence. God was like, you guys have so much capacity for good, but you only use your capacity for evil, and you commit violence against each other. So let me just see if I can start all over again and see if I can get y'all to think differently when I start over. Now, unfortunately, that didn't work, because we are still carrying out the same violence that the flood says God killed all of us for, which is problematic in and of itself, but we're just using the scripture. Why would God say the problem is violence and then kill us with violence? I get it. But what I'm saying is, I'm not talking about the nature of God in this instance. I'm talking about the nature of humanity. Humanity carries out violence against each other because there is this innate desire for us at times to be powerful, to be the dominant, the authoritative representation on the earth. And I feel like we shouldn't deflect either way. We shouldn't deny the resistance. We shouldn't deny the existence of this type of brutality. And we also shouldn't say, well, look, other people have done it too, so why are you talking about me? What other people did does not excuse you from the bullshit that you do.
Yes.
Right.
Hey.
Yes.
And I think we need to deal with all of the complexities of humanity. We can talk about God and the devil. Talk about your damn self for a minute. That's my thought. Nikki, you had your hand raised.
Well, I keep going back to you were talking about Shaniqua Walker Barnes' book and this exercise that she talked about that she did in class, where she, at the beginning of all of this, and she divided people into the different racial groups that were in the class, and to talk about what they celebrate about their race. And in all of the instances, the white people were struggled, right? They struggled to name what they can celebrate about their whiteness. And I think, gosh, that's just been ringing in my head since you said it. and I think it says so much more than just what's on the surface of that story. I think it speaks to when white people come to understand that so much of what they are celebrated for comes from a system that only works because it hurts other people. And like, the more you become aware that is where so much of your worth comes from, it messes with your brain. It messes with your emotions. It makes you go, "Who? What can I trust? What's real? What can I celebrate?" And when you struggle to find that, like, it makes sense to me that the white people in her classes deflect, and they try to say that the exercise is the problem, because they don't want to look in the face that whiteness is the problem, because that makes them question everything about themselves. And so, right. And so I think that one of the reasons we have to talk about this is, I think it's the only way that white people can really get to the truth of what's good about them as people.
Yes. Yes.
I feel like there's got to be something good there somewhere. So, but I think the only way we can come to that, the only way we can find it, is when we acknowledge what's propped us up that's not been good.
Yeah, there's so much good about white people. The problem that we have to address is none of the goodness about white people is tied to white people's whiteness.
Right. There we go. That's it.
Yeah. When you tie your existence to your whiteness, then you can't find anything good because whiteness was created as a form of evil.
Right.
So you have to figure out what is it about your humanity that makes you good, which means you have to deal with the aspect of whiteness and unpack that. And if we don't unpack that, white people will never be able to figure out what is really good and wholesome and genuine and caring and compassionate about me as a person. But I have to detach it from the whiteness because whiteness was never created as something that was good and compassionate and caring and loving and like Christ.
It's completely the opposite of all of that.
The exact opposite.
Yes, it is antithetical to the gospel.
Absolutely.
That's James Cone all the way, right? This idea of you got to forsake your whiteness and participate in
antithetical
to understand dollars. I mean, hey, Nikki, you have never paid $1, so I mean, it's okay.
I paid a couple dollars.
Wait a minute. Myron said antithesis earlier, so is it only antithetical?
I'll pay $1. I'll pay $1.
Right.
I got it. I'll take it. I'll take it. But I mean, Cole said
whiteness stands and is exactly the opposite of the gospel.
So now we know. Now we know what antithetical means. We can use an antithetical moving forward. Myron, go ahead. What were you saying?
All right. I was just agreeing and saying I think these are the words of James Cone, where he says white people have to forsake their whiteness and operate in blackness so that they can understand what good is. Right? This idea that you can't be saved by a white Christ. You've got to be saved by a black one that identifies with the poor and the oppressed and those who are on the margins of society.
Yes.
And then James Cone, who is a radical, said that if God is white, we need to kill God. If he operates in privilege and things and does not identify with those who are the marginalized, that's not the God that we want to participate with.
So let's do this real quick. So I want to get you all's thoughts on this.
Not me.
Because somebody brought it up earlier about the conflation of whiteness and Christianity. And there's a significant portion of U.S. history where prior to the idea of whiteness taking over the American identity, the term wasn't whiteness, it was Christian. And Christian morphed into whiteness. That was the banner under which Europeans came into this land and took over. They came and took over in the name of Christianity. And then Christianity morphed into whiteness. What are you all's thoughts on the conflation of being white and being Christian?